Welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am Daisy, your hostess, and in this video we will continue on with the Book of Life, written by Upton Sinclair, published in 1921 by the Payne Book Company out of Chicago. It is in the public domain. We have been going through various parts of his book, which now we're in part 4, which is the Book of Society, and we had just finished reading Hard Times. The author, in his book of the Book of Life, the Book of Love, the Book of the Body, and now the Book of Society, is in a way trying to recreate all these aspects of what we deal with as a human race. Oh, and by the way, if you just found us here at this video and you're new to our channel, welcome. You can actually go to the book playlist and you can grab the previous chapters so you can catch up. I'm going to stay here for a minute and offer my narrator's comments. If you'd rather just go into the next chapter, please do click on the description and you'll see the timestamp there. Otherwise, hang out with me here for a minute. Let's talk about those hard times and also the capitalist process. Well, it just seems to me that as a human race, we have yet to break the code. Are we striving for a utopia? Is that what we're doing? And as it seems to me, when you take and you lay out the masses of land on this earth, and if you're not happy with how this particular government offers how to live in society, you can up it up and go to another place and find out if you like it there instead, or hey, there's still tribes you can join in some parts of the world. And then we have what I call those vagrants and homeless people, those that have appeared to have given up. Some of these people have families, but they just refuse to be a part of any system and would rather rough it out there on the streets. I could tell you that when I was a deputy sheriff with Metro-Dade County many years ago, I was asked to participate in a study of the homeless with Barry University. And what I learned from this homeless coalition and going out there into the streets and talking with homeless people, some of them have given up. They don't believe in the system. They do not prescribe to the quote-unquote slavery by wages system, and they would rather just take their chances out there. During that time, I remember meeting an older lady, probably by my terms now would be my age. She was pushing a shopping cart, and that shopping cart was loaded to the hilt. She had everything on there, and interesting, she even had a dog tethered to it. And I spoke with her and about her situation, and let me tell you, what I found out was she did have a family and she had money. What arrangement she had in keeping her money secure, I didn't go any further on that, but I did ask her, I said, well, how does she meet with her family? And pretty much she just said she doesn't. She's out on the streets. They don't look for her, or she doesn't look for them. But if they wanted to, she said, well, they know where to find me. Some people just give up. And I don't know what's the psychology of what makes them break. And that's why I personally cannot say that I have understood a solution to homelessness, because from personal experience, by helping the university with this study, I learned that this percentage that goes through a hardship that ends up on the street also struggles to try and get themselves back. And they do find the local resources that can provide them temporary shelter or temporary jobs until they get back on their feet. But that percentage is so small. And the thing is that I've learned also is that the longer that people experience hard times, that time also is the time span that breaks them. And so you really need support, and you need some incredible courage and incredible faith. But can we really say that the systems are out there to for a long term sustain people to help them come back out of hard times? And in society, today's society, Do we really have that answer? That's a conundrum. Because some people will say, well, in America, we have a capitalist system, and if you work hard enough, you're going to, climb to the top. Often in the United States, we are sold these dreams where successful people made it to the top and they never graduated college. I mean, heck, there's the example of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, dropped out of university, not just any university, the Harvard University, and is a billionaire today. I am speaking for myself, and I may possibly represent many of the Americans that feel that there is a huge divide. And yes, I understand that we have the opportunity, and it's what we make of the opportunity. When you take the time to listen to these rags to riches stories, it seems to me that 8 out of 10 times, it's also who you know, quote unquote, in high places. Let's move on now to the next chapter titled The Iron Ring. Analyzes further the profit system which strangles production and makes true prosperity impossible. We have seen that in an exploiting society, there is a surplus which is taken by the exploiter, and that under the modern system, this surplus must be sold at a profit before production can continue. The vital fact in such a society is that the worker has not the money to buy back all that he produces. Therefore, it is inevitable that a surplus product should accumulate. When this happens, production must be cut down, and during that period, the worker is without a job and without means of living. The fact that he needs the product does not help him. The point is that he has not the money to buy it. In such a society, the productive machinery is never used to the full. The machinery is controlled by profit-seeking interest, seeking an opportunity to make sales, and restricting production according to the prospect of sales. So the actual product bears no relationship to the possible product, and people who live in an exploiting society can form no conception of true prosperity. For, you see, the market is limited by the competitive wage system. We have seen that in our own rich, prosperous country, only one family out of 6 has more than $1,000 a year income. Only one family out of 12 has $2,000 a year. It does not make any difference that the warehouses are bursting with goods. A family constitutes a market of so many dollars a year, and then, so far as the profit system is concerned, that family is non-existent. That family stops consuming, and the productive machinery is halted to that extent. I have been accustomed to portray the profit system under the simile of an iron ring riveted about the body of a baby. That ring would cause the baby some discomfort at the beginning, but it would not be serious, and the baby would get used to it. But as the baby grew, the trouble caused by the ring would increase, and finally, there would come a time when the baby would be suffering from a whole complication of troubles. And for each of these troubles, there would be but one remedy: break the ring. Does the baby cry all the time? Break the ring. Is its digestion defective? Break the ring. Is it threatened with convulsions or with blood poisoning? Break the ring. Here is our industrial society growing at a rate never equaled by any human baby. And here is this iron ring riveted about its middle. Here's poverty. Here's unemployment. Here's graft. Here's crime. Here is war and plague and famine. And for all these evils, there is but one cause and but one remedy: break the ring. Set production free from the strangulation of the profit system. I will admit that there may have been a time in the history of the social infant when this ring was necessary. I admit that if the great industrial machine was to be constructed, it was necessary that the mass of the people should consume only part of what they produced and should allow the balance to be reinvested as capital. But now it has been done, and the process is complete. We have a machine capable of producing many times more than we can consume, Shall we still go on building that machine? Shall we go on starving ourselves to save the money to multiply over and over again the products in order that we may be thrown out of work and be starved even more completely? A few generations ago, we had in colonial America a society that in part at least was free. In that society, everybody got the necessities of life. They did not have the modern Sunday supplement and the moving picture show, but they had bread and meat and good substantial clothing and furniture so well made that we still preserve it. The children in those days grew up to be strong and sturdy men and women who would have seen nothing to envy in the bodies or minds of the slum population of New York and Chicago. In short, they had all the true necessities of life, and yet their work was done by hand. The power process was unknown and undreamed of. Now comes modern machinery and multiplies the productive power of the hand laborer by 5, by 10, sometimes by 100. Here, for example, is the appeal to reason, selling millions of cheap books for 10 cents apiece and making a profit on it. Installing a gigantic press which takes paper, sheet after sheet, prints 128 pages of a book at one impression, and folds and stitches and binds the books all in one process and turns them out complete at the rate of 10,000 copies per hour. Here is a factory which turns out hundreds of thousands of automobiles a month. Here is a mill which turns out many millions of yards of cloth a month. If our colonial ancestors had been told about these marvels, they would have said instantly, then of course everybody in that society will have all the books they want, and all the clothing they want, and all the automobiles. Everybody in that society will have 5 or 10 or 100 times as much goods as we have. Imagine the bewilderment of our colonial ancestor if he had been told, the majority of the people in that society will not have so much of the real necessities of life as you have. They will have a few cheap trinkets designed to tickle their senses. They will have cheap newspapers, carefully contrived to keep their minds vacant and to keep them contented with their lot. They will have moving picture shows constructed for the same purpose, but all their material things will be flimsy, put together for show and not for permanence. Their food will be adulterated. Their clothing will be shoddy. Everything they have will be made not for their service, but for the profit of someone who lives by selling to them. The average wage earned by those who do the work of this new machine civilization will be less than half the amount necessary to purchase the necessities of a decent life, and 1/10 of the total population will be living in such poverty that they are unable to maintain physical fitness or to rear their children into full-sized men and women. End of chapter 58. We're going to continue on to chapter 59 right here in this video. If you can, take a minute, hit that like button. If you like what you see on this channel, subscribe and share it with your friends. All right, let's move on to chapter 59, Foreign Markets. Considers the efforts of capitalism to save itself by marketing its surplus products abroad and what results from these efforts. If our analysis of present-day society is correct, we have the enormous populations of the modern industrial countries living always on the verge of starvation, their chance for survival depending at all times upon the ability of their employers to find a profitable market for a surplus of goods. At first, the employer seeks that market at home, but when the home markets are glutted, he goes abroad, and so develops the phenomenon of foreign trade and rivalry for foreign trade as the basic fact of capitalism and the fundamental cause of modern war. Let us get clear, simple distinction concerning foreign trade. There is a kind of trade which is normal and would thrive in a free society. In the United States, we can produce nearly all the necessities of life, but there are a few which we cannot produce. Rubber, for example, and bananas, and good music. These things we wish to import. We buy them from other countries and incur a debt, which we pay with products which the other countries need from us. Wheat, for example, and copper, and moving pictures with cowboys in them. This is equal exchange and a natural phenomenon. A free society would produce such surplus goods as were necessary to produce the foreign products that is desired. When it had produced that much, the workers would stop and take a vacation until they wanted more foreign products. But under capitalism, we have an entirely different condition. We produce a surplus of goods, which we have to sell in order to keep our factories running and to keep our working population from starving. And note that it does not help us to get back on equal quantity of foreign goods in exchange. We must have what we call a favorable balance. That is, we must have other people going into debt to us so that we can be continually shipping out more goods than we take back, continually piling up credits which we can negotiate or turn into cash so that we can go on and repeat the process of making more goods, selling them for more profits, and putting the surplus into the form of more machinery to make still more goods and still more profits. And then, after a while, we come upon this embarrassing phenomena. Nations which buy and do not sell must either do it by sending us gold or by giving them credit. The sending of gold cannot go on indefinitely because then we should have all the gold, and if other nations had none, that would destroy their credit. On the other hand, business cannot be done by credit indefinitely, for the very essence of credit is a promise to pay, and payment can only be made in goods. And how can we take the goods without ruining our own industry? 15 years ago, I pointed this out in a book. The argument was irrefutable and the conclusion inescapable, but the few critics who noted it repeated their usual formula about dreamers and theorists. Now, however, the business mills have ground on, and what was theory has become fact before our eyes. We have trusted the nations of Europe for some $10 billion worth of goods, and they are powerless to pay. And if they did pay, they would bankrupt American industry. France wishes to collect an enormous indemnity from Germany, but nobody can figure out how this indemnity can be paid without ruining French industry. The French have demanded coal from Germany and have got more than they can use and are dumping it in Belgium and Holland, with the result that the British coal industry is ruined. The French clamor that the Germans must pay for the destruction they wrought in northern France, and the Germans offer to send German workmen to rebuild the ruined towns. But the French renounce this as an insult. It would deprive French working men of their jobs. So I might continue for pages pointing out the manifold absurdities which result from a system of industry for the profit of a few instead of for the use of all. Ever since I first began to read the newspapers some 25 or 30 years ago, all our political life has been nothing but the convulsions of a social body tortured by the constricting ring of the profit system. Everywhere one group struggling for advantage over another group, and politicians engaged in playing one interest against another interest. My boyhood recollections of public life consist of campaign slogans having to do with the tariff. Quote, production and prosperity, reciprocity, the full dinner pail, the foreigner pays the tax, etc., etc., end quote. The working man under the profit system is like a man pounding away at a pump. He can get a thin trickle of water from the spout of the pump if he works hard enough, but in order to get it, he has to supply 10 times as much to someone who has tapped the pipe. But the tapping has been done underground, where the working man cannot see it. All the working man knows is that there is no job for him if the products of cheap foreign labor are allowed to be dumped on the American market. That is obvious, and so he votes for a tax on foreign imports, high enough to enable his own employer to market at a profit. He does not realize that he is thus raising the price of everything that he buys, and so leaving himself worse off than he was before. All governments are delighted with this tariff device because they are thus enabled to get money from the public without the public's knowing it. The foreigner pays the tax, we are told, and as a result of this arrangement, the Steel Trust just before the war was selling its product at a high price to the American people and taking its surplus abroad and selling it to the foreigner at half the domestic price. And we see the same thing in every line of manufacture and all over the world. We see one nation after another withdrawing itself as a market for manufactured products and entering the list as a marketer. One more nation now able to fill all its own needs and going out hungrily to look for foreign customers, adding to the glut of the world's manufactured products and the ferocity of international competition. At the close of the Civil War, the total exports of the United States averaged approximately $300 million, and the total imports were about the same. In 1892, the exports first touched $1 billion, while the imports were about 9/10 of that sum. In the year 1913, the exports were nearly $2.5 billion, while the imports were $600,000 less. And in the year 1920, our exports were over $8 billion and our imports a little over $5 billion. So we have a favorable balance of almost $3 billion a year, and as a result, we are on the verge of ruin. This iron ring of overproduction and lack of market exercises upon our industrial body a steady pressure, a slow strangling. But because the body is in convulsions, struggling to break the ring, the pressure of the ring is worse at some times than at others. We have periods of what we call prosperity, followed by periods of panic and hard times. You must understand that only a small part of our business is done by means of cash payments, whether in gold or silver or paper money. Close to 99% of our business is done by means of credit, and this introduces into the process a psychological factor. The businessman expects certain profits, and he capitalizes these expectations. Business booms because everybody believes everybody else's promise. Credit expands like a huge balloon with the breath of everybody's enthusiasm. But meantime, real business, the real market, remains just what it was before. It cannot increase because of the iron ring, which restricts the buying power of the mass of the people by the competitive wage. So presently, the time comes when somebody realizes that he has overcapitalized his hopes. He curtails his orders, he calls in his money, and the impulse thus started precipitate a crash in the whole business world. We had such a crash in 1907, and I remember a Wall Street man explaining it in a magazine article entitled, "Somebody Asked for $1." We learned one lesson by that panic. At least the big financial men learned it, and had Congress pass what is called the Federal Reserve Act, a provision whereby, in time of need, the government issues practically unlimited credit to banks. This, of course, is fine for the banks. It puts the credit of everybody else behind them, and all they have to do is to stop lending money, except to the big insiders, and sit back and wait, while the little men go to the wall and the mass of us live on our savings or starve. We saw this happen in the year 1920, and for the first time, we had hard times without having a financial panic. But instead, we see prices staying high because the banks have issued so much paper money and bank credits. End of chapter 59. All right, my friend. Hopefully you've been enjoying this. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and head on over to the next chapter where I will be there with Capitalist War.